Oh, good afternoon,
They
good
are
morning, good evening.
nice to be joined by you both. Hello and welcome to the HSE Half Hour. My name is Lauren. I'm the Head of Client Engagement here at Executive Network Group. Myself, my lovely colleague Laura, we've been doing this for nearly 2 years now, haven't we, Laura?
It's crazy, I know.
That is mad.
Four
So
years.
bringing you, it's flown. But so we're going to continually bring you a half-hour live show every month on all things recruitment and safety. Over to you, Laura.
Yeah, so hopefully you all know who I am by now. Like I said, been doing it for 2 years, but I'm Laura Orcott. So I'm an Associate Director for HSE Recruitment. We're obviously a health and safety recruitment agency. Associate Director, what that means is I get to do all of the fun stuff, really. So I get to go out, meet everybody, network, speak at conferences, do the live shows. Pretty much just networking and traveling all the time. That's my role.
Nice. Very nice. So I work closely with Laura and the safety recruitment team at HSE, creating the white papers on safety industry trends and plenty of information. Do have a look at our website, have a look. But we wanted to share this with you, our wider LinkedIn network. So as mentioned, it's always an interactive and live session. So things might go wrong, but please do comment, ask questions as we go along. I will get to them as soon as the conversation allows. And you've all probably noticed we're joined by a wonderful, very special guest today. So welcome Dr. Mark Mcbride, founder and CEO of Equal Engineers and a keynote speaker. So Mark is here to talk to us today about everything kind of ED&I, diversity, equality, inclusion, and in particular, making DEI work in male-dominated industries, teams. So a real interesting subject, especially within the safety function. So welcome, Mark.
Yeah, thanks.
To be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, Mark. So yeah, for those of you watching, we actually did a roundtable with Mark in London in February. Which was entitled, really great title, I thought, Playing It Safe with DEI, How Risk-Averse Culture Kills Inclusion. And it was fascinating, really, really great. So we're very lucky that Mark's agreed to come along today and discuss it a little bit more with us. So, Mark, I guess to kick us off, could you just tell us a bit about yourself and what Equal Engineers is?
Sure. So I'm a chartered chemical engineer by background, specialized in safety. And I used to work in industry, and I saw a need to create an entity that would apply focus to different diversity groups in engineering. So I set up originally an LGBT network that grew to become a very large network across the UK. But then I set up Equal Engineers in 2017 to expand out and focus on different diversity strands. And I realized that approach, whilst necessary, can also be divisive. It can perpetuate the sentiment of them and us. Mm-hmm. And in the current climate, I guess, that we're seeing play out now internationally, we're seeing that ricochet. We're seeing that pushback, the kind of pendulum swinging back. And ultimately, I guess in retrospect, I could kind of sense that coming when running into engineering and when building out my business. So we pivoted to a strategy of engaging the male majority. And I call it majority group industry rather than a male dominated industry, because that can, again, the language, it can sound threatening to and accusatory to those that they've got good intentions and have never been bad or done anything with malintent. And so the whole language around this, I'm very careful with the words that I use, and language that I've used has evolved. But anyway, so yes, Equal Engineers, we help engineering businesses in general, engineer inclusive cultures to attract, develop, and retain talent. And we do that through a bunch of stuff to help in programs, awards, mentoring. And we do a bunch of stuff to shift the culture of the existing workforce. And that's where the Safe Leader, the book that I recently wrote, is a real most recent manifestation of my viewpoints on what we need to do as a sector. So it centers in on helping men, helping everyone to understand their own diversity story, their own difference. What can they share with the world in order to change the culture? So it's playing into the familiarity that engineers have with physical safety and extending it to psychological safety. And we're getting some good traction there with it.
Oh, that's great. It's a really interesting concept, isn't it? Because, we've obviously talked about diversity and inclusion for years. It's something both Laura and I are really passionate about. And we do find that, when we're putting stuff out, we get that pushback from men who feel really isolated and they feel they're not part of the conversation, or they feel it's accusatory. And to be honest, I've never known what to do with that. I've got no idea. So this is a really interesting concept.
I've always felt like it's a really fine line tightrope that I've been walking in advocating this viewpoint, because it's not that we want to let people get off the hook of doing the hard work to dismantle systemic misogyny, homophobia, biphobia, racism, all the isms, that can be so entrenched in our systems and policies, etc. But the strategy we've had thus far of continuing to spotlight the plights and needs of minoritized, underrepresented groups isn't driving the action that's needed on the part of the majority group. You have to meet people where they're at. And unfortunately, as humans, we are selfish and self-centered, and you have to make it relevant to them. How does what we're talking about apply to their day-to-day? And maybe they've been negatively impacted by having not adopted said policies and ways of being in our culture. And that's what came through in our masculinity and engineering research that we did at Equal Engineers. So in 2018, I discovered the breakdown by suicide, that I discovered the suicide rates broken down by occupation in the United Kingdom. Statistically, more likely to die through suicide if you worked in the construction, manufacturing, or process industries than, say, a typical hazard like a dropped object falling from height, electrocution. And that just bedazzled me. I was like, oh my goodness, how can this be the case? As a safety engineer, I used to help design out risk, manage residual risk to as low as reasonably practicable. And we would never tolerate such a high rate of loss of life on any physical hazard, slips, trips, and falls, or anything like that. So why are we tolerating a high rate of loss of life due to a lack of psychological safety in the workplace? A culture where people are not able to be open about whatever it is that might be going on beneath their waterline. That's a metaphorical iceberg with turbulence of stuff in the diversity of your life experiences. And that was the hook for me. That was the aha moment, the kind of Venn diagram of my life of being a safety engineer and being a diversity consultant coming together. And that sweet spot being, this is where the answer is for our high industry professions, aligning better the great work that we do on safety with DEI culture. And the fact that if we can create a culture where people can be open, you don't have to be open. Just caveat that. It's not about the removal of privacy, and we're now talking about all our dirty laundry in the workplace. But it's very different in a culture where you can be open than one which is, don't ask, don't tell, we don't want to know, come in, do your job, go home, and that's it. And I think we've been missing that softness to our culture. And as men, we have not been good at being leaders, at creating that culture, because ourselves have been told and trained over the years to hold a steady face, be the one that can be in control, not let down our guard. Letting down our guard and showing some vulnerability is a sign of weakness. Can't be emotional, etc., etc. And we're seeing this play out now with positive, the movement to try and create more positive role models, masculinity. I haven't watched it yet. This Adolescence.
Oh yes.
Netflix. Now, this is becoming part of the narrative more and more and more. Paternity leave in the UK being absolutely not very good, therefore excluding fathers, the ability to spend time with their young kids. And one of the best indicators actually for outcomes, longitudinal outcomes for young children, is actually time spent with both parents in the early years as they grow up. It supersedes anything than getting a private education or stuff like that, so I'm very passionate about this, as you can see. I think it holds to transformational change in our industry.
Yeah, I think you've said, well, everything you said then was excellent, Mark, but there was a few real poignant moments for me, especially when you talked about paternity leave in the UK. My other half's an engineer. We really struggled with, I had a premature baby. He couldn't have more than a week off. Then he was on shift. It was an absolute nightmare. So I can definitely resonate with that. From what you mentioned there as well about culture, I think that's a key one, isn't it? Organisational culture and integrating this. So how do you believe, engineering, and I know when you mentioned earlier about language, but the typical male-dominated industry, should I say, how can they effectively integrate, diversity, equity, inclusion into their culture, and how does safety play a role in that, Mark? Big
culture. I want to get my words right. Culture is made by the people.
Okay.
So it's easy to separate. So I could wheel off some generic answer to that question about having the right systems and policies and blah blah blah, but and that makes one a layer removed though from the change that you're wanting to seek and to make. And I'd say to any listeners, watchers, viewers on this, it starts with you. It starts with you making the change that you want to make for yourself, but also those in your team, sideways, laterally across the business, and up and down, therefore all circles. So you just sharing that little bit of vulnerability there about the experience you'd gone through with your partner. I have seen when DEI is framed in this way with couples in particular who've been trying to have a family, it has a ricochet effect. It speaks to that experience that you went through, that when you came into the workplace, you felt like you couldn't talk about it. You felt like you had to hide. And that energy delta, that difference between showing up as who you are, what you're going through in that moment, on that day, and not being able to talk about it, creates an energy difference between how you're going to perform that day. Are you in the best mindset to be doing your job in that moment? And so that we'll always have that. We're never going to be perfect and always showing up, being able to be who we are. But it's trying to close that gap and create a culture which is, I'm here for you if you need it. And that is only really achieved through building trust, being open and authentic with your teams. And it also plays to how open you are. So in the Safe Leader, the book, the model, the Safe Leader principles, SAFE stands for share, act, feel, and empower. And it's a circle. So people start off with sharing, understanding what your difference is. What is the story that if you speak openly about that then gives permission for others to also speak about it, because guess what? It's maybe been on their minds. So we then have a topic going from having not had any oxygen in the organizational discourse to then having 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 6 32. You get my point. Exponential growth in terms of the conversation. It starts happening. Then when you've got a critical mass, or not even a critical mass, when you've got knowledge of the fact that something is affecting some people, you can then look at, right, how's this playing out the wider workforce? Do our policies and systems best approach this, best support this? And as a leader, so if you're a leader in engineering, what can you be open about on that stage next time that you're in a town hall, a one-to-many forum, or a one-to-some, or even a one-to-one on all levels? What can you be open about that might then give permission for that topic to then become part of the discourse? So for men, that comes down to talking about things that are beneath your surface. So if you've always projected this strong leader who has it all together, and I've never really let people in the workplace into seeing beneath your surface, sharing an element of vulnerability there. I tell you now, if we had more male leaders doing that, that would spark a curiosity for them to start learning about the needs of other groups. They'd start becoming more of a sponge and receptive to how women are experienced in the workplace, how Black women, like the intersectionality element. And it would just unleash this rich tapestry learning, because we would then shift the feeling of walking on eggshells, the nervousness that often makes us passive in our approach to diversity because we don't want to offend, we don't want to be cancelled, we won't be accused of being, we want to say the wrong thing, you know, and that just drives everyone to not talk about anything, you know, and that fundamentally, that's where we are right now in society in general, and we need to get over that.
Absolutely. The vulnerability thing, I think, is really, really interesting. We did a women in safety networking event in the Netherlands a couple of weeks ago. And one of the ladies came up and she was talking about vulnerability hangovers, which I really identified with, where you feel like you've shared and you've connected with people. And the next day you think, oh my God, was that the right thing to do? Have I shared too much? Have I opened myself up to something? And it's a really interesting concept. She talked of those female and masculine energies. And I think, I've always worked in quite a male-dominated industry, not so much anymore, but definitely when I started. And I really lent into those, I think, male energies. And that meant I cut off a lot of that vulnerability. And I didn't really open myself up. And I haven't allowed that discussion probably with my team and other people. So that's something I'm really trying to work on at the moment. So any tips from that for letting yourselves be vulnerable, and how do we do that?
I think you speak there, Laura, to sort of an element of, it sounds like the introspection that you need to do is, are you being you, or have you adopted some learned behaviors around you that have helped you then conform to a majority type culture? But equally, that might also be how you've developed, and you're okay with that. You know, it's not like all this is about, oh my goodness, I've deviated from who I am and I'm not at my core. But for some people, that might be an issue. That might be a case, you know. So we change as we move forward in life, and it's just checking in with yourself. There's a really great word. It's about alignment. Okay. Are you in alignment with who you are, your purpose, what you want to get out of work, what you want to get out of your life, the legacy once you leave this earth? You know, are you working to a sort of bigger purpose, or are you having to shape, conform, be malleable, change? And you know, there's instances where we have to do that in life for our own safety, you know, for our own safety. I used to always think like sexual orientation, like it not being something that you can see, as being a bit of a pain, to be honest, because it would make the rollout on DEI focus in this area easier if you can see someone's sexual orientation. But actually, you know, from a safety perspective, in some jurisdictions where you can get the death penalty, or, you know, being able to be covert and hide, it's not a good thing, but it allows an element of safety. And so I think it's being aware of that aspect of diversity, or that aspect of people's experiences. There are some things that you cannot hide, and therefore the people that then have that identity that is underrepresented relative to the majority group, they will likely experience much more levels of inequity or microaggressions on a more common basis. You know, people with visible disabilities, people who are non-white, and you, if you're not that identity, then how are you ever going to know what it's like? You're only going to learn what it's like through acquiring learned experience, through listening to talks, through talking to people, through reading books, through expanding your network, so you've got a solid, grounded frame of reference on that lived experience. So it's about expanding your learned experience. So I use those two phrases often: learned experience and lived experience. We need more people being open about their lived experience for life experiences that are taboo, that we don't often talk about. And that's where the whole how men are not being open and being vulnerable, all the stuff that can happen in life. And then we also need to be confident and leaning into expanding our learned experience. And that's where we start pushing into the discomfort, get comfortable being uncomfortable, you know, all those phrases. Like, that's what that means. It means trust that you won't always have it right, but be willing to accept the feedback if you get it wrong. And that's how you grow. It's like exercising. You know, if you want to get fit, you want to get lean, it's not comfortable going to the gym. It's not comfortable like increasing your weights. Like, to keep seeing progress, changing your physique, you need to keep increasing the weights. You need to up that cardio. You need to make that heart faster. It's the same with stretching that muscle of leadership. It's about
Yeah.
putting yourself in discomfort zones, but being okay being there, you know.
That's really, really interesting. Yeah, I love the lived experience, learned experience thing. That makes perfect sense to me. I felt we were going to go into a little bit of a therapy session there, so maybe you and I should talk offline after this. But you know, you've talked about loads of really interesting stuff today. But one of the things at the start that that kind of struck me is you highlighted the suicide rates in
Yes.
you know in industries, particularly like construction. So I wondered if maybe you've got any strategies you think companies can adopt to address mental health and reduce those statistics?
So
A big question again, sorry.
no, so yeah, I'm aware I could talk for like a 2-hour webinar on this. So being succinct, we've got lots of research on our website, Masculinity in Engineering. The survey's open just now, actually, until the end of the month. We've extended it to
Great.
either April or March. So if people
We can link that in the comments.
Yeah, send me that across and I'll pop the link in for everyone.
What companies can do is we've tried to make it easier for people to do stuff. So that's why I wrote the book, The Safe Leader, and that's why we've designed a course to follow on from that. It's called the Safe Leader course. We've got an open course that starts in June. It's across 2 weeks. Like 2 or 3 hours per module over a 2-week period. So it's about 8 or 10 hours of guided learning hours. But we also offer it in-house. And it takes people through the cycle of sharing, acting, feeling, and empowering. It goes into sufficient enough depth that you get that introspection on the part of the learners, but doesn't deviate into like a full-on mental health first aid training therapy session, as you said. It keeps it at the level that facilitates the learner doing some of that introspection. And often we don't give space and time for that, for people to do that, and especially people that don't do it naturally, men. So it's sort of encouraging that. And what we find is that the learners, it's a really good team bonding exercise, because if you run it as an in-house course, it people learn about things about one another that they haven't spoken about or shown up about in the workplace context. So we found in the couple of clients that we've done it with, it's actually helped strengthen the leadership capability, because we're naturally facilitating dialogue on stuff that they don't talk about in the regular day-to-day workplace context when doing the engineering, you know. So as we move through the safe cycle, it encourages that sharing, that learning. And sometimes those stories are quite deep. It's not the trauma Olympics. Sometimes they're positive. Sometimes it's stuff that people are doing. You know, you'd look at someone and you might judge them based on what they look like and stereotype them, but actually they're sponsoring one client, we had someone who was sponsoring a football club, a youth football club, and he was getting trainers from people, like used shoes to give to the young boys because they couldn't afford it. And he spends his own cash on this stuff, and no one knew that about what this guy did. And it was like, oh my goodness, you're a saint. That's amazing. Like, that's incredible. Like, you know, and he had, and his motivation for doing that was linked to his family putting everything on the line for him because he had potential to be a footballer, and he recognized it in retrospect what they were doing for him, and he wasn't okay with that. So anyway, like that's just one anecdote of stories. Like, there are so many stories in your culture, in your business, in your people that we want to bring to the surface. So I'm really interested in like developing good storytellers within engineering as well. So I partner with my public speaking coach here in New York. He does a session as part of the Safe Leader framework about developing your anchor story and why you do the work that you do. And it's self-investment I've done personally in developing my public speaking skills. And I just think if we can take engineers through this training method that has people digging a bit deep to understand their stories, but then also develop more capable and competent storytellers, then it might have the dual approach of creating people who can inspire more people to become engineers, but we also create better public speakers. So that's the hypothesis anyway. And my ambition is to roll out this course nationally, internationally. I'm talking to some clients over here in the US about it, because it provides a sort of middle path. So as things on DEI become a bit more polarized or a bit more unacceptable in the workplace dialogue, bringing it under the stealth mode behind safety, I think there's a way we can integrate the work we're doing on DEI within what we already do on safety.
Yeah.
We can just call it something else. So that's where my mind's at strategy wise right now for equal engineers. And we're working with our clients to do that.
Fantastic. Good. So we have got a few comments. One of the questions just say, Mark, are you aware of the draft standard provision of inclusive PPE? So links to safety, linked to DEI. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's so good that we should be creating standards, national standards, and then ideally international standards on this stuff, especially in some regions of the world where some of this information is being erased, information is being taken off. It's important that we retain it, but we need to remember that the US is only but one member when it comes to ISO standards. And the standards process is designed to create, equity and equity of input. I actually did a webinar yesterday for my own podcast, The Safe Leader, with Martin Cottam, who sits on the ISO TSC 263, the number, workplace organizational, occupational health and safety standards, 45,000. And they're bringing out 45,010, which is a one on menopause and menstruation health in the workplace. And they had a lot of pushback on it, on the very creation of the standard. He says, I mean, this will come out in the podcast. He said, often naturally we get a whole bunch of comments about the contents that's in a standard. We have to respond, and very rarely do we get organizations or countries, I guess, contesting whether or not a standard should even exist. And on that particular standard, they had some entities that say, well, this shouldn't be part of workplace health and safety. So that's where it sits on an international stage. But I think absolutely the more we can do in the United Kingdom to be a leader on this will pay dividends in the future as other nations start to move into the 21st century. And
it sounds fascinating. I'll definitely go and listen to that podcast episode after this. And actually, we'll link that as well in the comments.
It'll be out in about a month, that one, I think.
Okay, perfect.
But the Safe Leader in general podcast has got loads of great. I'm biased, obviously, but it's got loads of great people on it. So yeah, worth a listen.
Fantastic. Well, I think that pretty much brings us to the end of the session. And I know this is a huge topic that we could have a million half-hour sessions on. So firstly, Mark, a huge thank you for joining me and Laura today. Really appreciated you joining us. It's been a fantastic discussion. And I believe Laura mentioned we're hopefully going to be running another kind of collaboration roundtable later with you this year on the subject. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, date to be confirmed.
Yeah,
we've got mutual crossover, so very happy to next time I'm back in the UK, let's get that Midlands or Northwest, Northeast, wherever it was we said, let's get a date sorted.
Perfect.
Yeah, let's get that sorted. Fab. And if anyone is interested to find out more, Mark, if they can reach out to yourself, on your LinkedIn, drop a message all things kind of DEI and safety. And then if you'd like to find out more about upcoming events, such as this roundtable that we will get booked in, drop a message into the inbox, info@hcrecruitment.com. Have a look at the website and we'll take it from there. So that pretty much leads us to the end. What are we talking about next month, Laura?
Yeah, so we've actually got a great episode coming in April. So we're going to be joined by the fab Dr. Andrew Sharman and Jakob Ogorek. So Andrew Sharman is obviously a trustee of 1% Safer, 1% Safer, sorry, and Jakub is a trustee and is the CEO of Polski Systems in Poland. So this is a really special episode for World Safety Day, on World Safety Day, the 28th of April, and we're going to be talking about workplace accidents, we're going to be talking about 1% Safer and the amazing work that movement's been doing, and Jakub will be sharing his experience as a non-safety professional who's been working years in the industry. He's a fantastic person with a really unique perspective, I think, on this topic. So yeah, if you come and join us, that'll be April 28th for that next installment. Of course, it is a live show again, but for that one, if you want to submit any questions in advance for Jakub and Andrew, you could do so in the comments here, or again, you can email that info@hserecruitment.com.
Fab.
Wonderful.
And that's everything from us today. So yeah, thank you again for joining us, everyone. Thank you, Mark, for coming along. I think there's quite a few more comments coming through. So sorry we haven't had time to get to everything. Mark, I think maybe you and I will answer some of these after the show. Or happy for everyone to reach out to us. But yeah, hopefully we will see you in April for the next edition. See you later.
Thank you. See you later.